for joining me today, Tsahi. Let's talk about AV1. What's the state of the art and the state of compatibility in video encoding today?
Sure. So AV1 is a video codec that is optional in WebRTC and implemented across the browsers. If you think about video codecs in WebRTC, these are the tools that we use in order to encode and decode the video or compress and decompress the video. So when we do this session now live, or when we do the session for recording purposes on WebRTC, we both send our video across the internet compressed. We do that also if you watch a YouTube video or anything else. We don't send uncompressed video. It's impossible to do that. The mandatory to implement codecs in WebRTC are VP8 and H.264. And then we had VP9 come in, and companies started adopting it over the years. And then came AV1. The main difference between AV1 and everything before that is that there is like a complete acceptance of the whole industry for this specific codec. With H.264 and VP8, you had different groups saying we want different camps in each side, saying we want this codec, we want that codec. H.264 because it's legacy and everyone supported that, and there were patents involved that people got money for using that codec, versus those that didn't want to use that on the VP8 side that said, well, we don't want to pay for patents. So there was a big fight there. We got two of them as mandatory to implement. Then Google came out with VP9, another royalty-free codec, placed that in WebRTC. We still got people not wanting that. And the reason was because this was Google. We don't like Google as a company. And the ecosystem didn't grow around VP9 as big as it should have. The other thing is that VP9 also competed with the HEVC, which is the successor of H.264, and again, a problem there. At some point, the industry got to a point where they said, let's open the Alliance of Open Media and put an AV1 codec in there. That's how they called it, and that codec is going to be royalty-free. No, so you don't need to pay for the patents. And we're going to back that up as the whole industry. So you'll have there all the browser vendors, which are also all of the modern operating system vendors. You have the large cloud vendors, and in cloud I will also include Netflix and Amazon. So these two are there. Then you have vendors like Cisco in there, and chipset vendors like AMD, and I think NVIDIA is also there. I'm not sure. The only missing company there for some reason is Qualcomm. They do have patents on HEVC and H.264, by the way. But the end result is that everyone is in AV1, so AV1 is going to be with us for the coming years. Then the question was, when are we going to start seeing the adoption of AV1? Now, an adoption of a video codec requires multiple steps to it. We need the hardware to support it. AV1 takes more CPU than H.264 and VP8 and VP9. Why? Because it's more complex. It can compress a lot better. So we need better hardware. We need to wait until a lot of devices out there die off on us, and we stick to those that are new. Then there is hardware encoders and decoders. We want these, and we don't really have hardware encoding and decoding for AV1. We do, but not a lot and not enough, and not in most devices and chipsets. After we have that bit done over the specification that was finalized only 2 or 3 years ago, then you need to start having developers that will build their products on top of it. We had AV1 in WebRTC in Chrome for a few years now. Nobody really used that because you tried using it. It took up too much of the CPU of the device. And when you ask yourself, well, how do I even do this session that we have now of one-on-one call? And the answer is, you don't. It's impossible. Okay. Ever since then, the software codec that is being used for encoding and decoding AV1 has been optimized, and it has gone through phases of optimization, where today I think it has been said that it's like 17% or some other, not such a big number, above the CPU requirements of something like H.264, okay, which is not that bad if you think about it.
Right. And the compression benefits you're getting are much larger for that yes. extra CPU cost.
Yes. Right. And it comes with SVC, scalable video coding support, built into it already. And you now also have all of the RTP payloads and headers and stuff that you need in order to support that well, almost out of the box. So the only missing piece in a way is someone to take all that and implement it. And yes, Google Meet supports AV1 for half a year or a year now already. It's something that we've reported inside WebRTC Insights long ago. What was interesting is what happened 2 months ago when Jitsi announced that from now on, Jitsi Meet prefers AV1 as their main codec. That was a big surprise, at least for me, because I always thought if we start seeing AV1 support in production, in product, you need to wait until the end of 2025 until you see something that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes, demos, the ability to support that, just striking a feature. We do VP9, that's our suggested codec for you, but if you really want AV1, it's there, just enable that and don't come back if something gets wrong. Okay, things like that. But here, Jitsi came and said, this is what we support, period, out of the box. This is what we have. And then the most fascinating thing is that the whole post explains what have they done in order to get there. And that includes checking the CPU requirements and the memory requirements, understanding where can they run it and where it won't work and break down in terms of the specification of the device that is running the codecs. Then making sure that the payload types, the payload headers work the way they should. Adding all of the stuff that is needed on signaling to support that. Adding all the stuff that's needed on the RTP side to support that because they did some things that are different than what we do in other video codecs. Support for SVC. They needed to add that as well. And then there was this minor problem that even if you do all that, with some devices, they're not going to be able to do AV1 because it's too CPU intensive. So they had to be able to say, well, we now have AV1, but we had in the past VP8 and VP9. We need to support them as well. So some calls are going to be on VP8 and VP9, although our preference is AV1, which is again great, but you need to be able to do it dynamically in the session. So it's like the two of us are doing this conversation. We have good machines. I don't, but never mind that. So we run AV1 for this call. A third person joins, he can't use AV1. What happens? At that moment in time, we need to downgrade all three of us to use VP9 or VP8.
Yeah.
And if things improve or he leaves, we need to know that and move back to AV1. So all that dynamic changes of the codecs are things that they've introduced to Jitsi in order to support AV1 as their preferred codec. Okay.
So Jitsi's made a big investment in the future, but because they're a big bet on the future here, but because we do have more industry alignment around AV1 being encoding of the future,
yes,
it's a safe bet, but they're still making it early, and so kudos to them for that, for making that investment in the application. But it sounds like it's primarily going to benefit them, or their users rather, in like smaller one-on-one calls between higher end users, and a tool like Jitsi Meet that does support multi-party conversations is less benefit in that multi-party, right?
I don't know, to tell you the truth, because in multi-party you decode more than you encode. And in multi-party, a lot of the users are going to be in very small windows, which means that you need to encode very little and decode very little in terms of bit rates.
That's true, yeah.
So then using AV1 might be the better approach.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't know. I'm assuming, and I heard in a way, that a considerable percentage of their calls is actually using AV1 today already.
That's great.
So it's not as if it was only an investment in the future, it was an investment in the present.
Yeah.
But in a way that is very hard for others to come and compete. Mm-hmm. Okay. If you take Jitsi as an open source framework and say, well, can the other open source vendors do the same? Probably not that easily. Why is that? Because MediaSoup and Pion and Janus, okay, their client SDKs are not as sophisticated as the one that Jitsi has. Jitsi is a full-fledged application, so they can do all of these optimizations and bake that into the application. I don't see that happening inside the Janus or MediaSoup. because that's more akin to a server and you bring your client from home.
Right.
So they would have to invest a lot more on the client side than they have to achieve in any other solution that they have today. For example, if you look at the vendors that are doing today video, programmable video and video APIs and CPaaS stuff, and now they say, well, let's add AV1. That's great, but the market and industry is in the LLM side and generative AI, which we've discussed like a gazillion of times. Every month we talk about LLMs.
We almost got through this conversation without mentioning them.
Just try that last few seconds, cut it out, and then we continue. So they're going to be hard-pressed going back and saying, well, let's stop everything. We now need to find a video expert and start to explore that and do things here.
Right.
So in a way, I think it was a smart move from Jitsi part of doing that. And now they should go and invest in that thing that we should not be speaking about in this session, because it's important for everyone as well.
Right. All right. Well, it'll definitely be interesting to see more about, whatever statistics they share in the future about usage of AV1. But interesting and positive architectural change and positive sign for the adoption of AV1 in general. And as devices continue to catch up with it, we'll no doubt see wider spread usage of it across platforms too.
Definitely.
Well, Tsahi, thanks as always for sharing your insights with us today. Anything else you want to add on this topic before we close?
No, I also mentioned that in my my tip of the that I send over my newsletter in Blog Geek Me. You can go subscribe and read these things there as well.
Perfect. All right. So as always, go check out bloggeek.me for more information about Tsahi's work and for more information about future episodes of WebRTC Live. Check us out at WebRTC.ventures. Thanks, Tsahi.
Thank you, Arin.
Thanks for joining us for WebRTC Live. Visit our website at WebRTC.ventures to learn more about our custom design and development services and to learn more about upcoming episodes of WebRTC Live.